Thank you, Ashton. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome Kurian Tharakan to our AGM as our guest speaker. He's the founder of the sales and marketing strategy firm, Strategy Peak Sales and Marketing Advisors, and he's a 27-year veteran of the sales and marketing industry. He's consulted for companies in numerous sectors on their go-to-market strategy. Mr. Tharakan's association with the university goes back many years, though. In 1990, he started his involvement with the recently formed Business Alumni Association, serving on numerous committees and eventually as its president. In 2005, he was appointed as the School of Business representative to Alumni Council, where he served for 3 years. And beginning in 2011, he served for 6 years as a senator on the University of Alberta Senate. So there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation, again in the chat box. But now I ask you to join me in welcoming Kurian with his presentation. Thanks, Kurian, for being here today.
Thank you. So let me see if I can share my screen here. There we go. Give me 1 second. Up it comes. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks for sticking around and not, fleeing for the virtual exits when I showed up. This is a year of biblical proportions. And we're not even halfway done yet. A year of biblical proportions. It starts with COVID. Who saw that coming? We have George Floyd's murder. We have locust plagues all over the world, threatening to eat up all sorts of food stocks and creating famine. We have the Chinese fighting the Indians on the roof of the world. That just happened a couple of days ago, right? People are shooting at each other in the Himalayas. Crazy stuff. And all the way around, in this world of biblical proportions, I feel that, I had this question. Whatever happened to the murder hornets? What happened to the murder hornets? They were promised a big time screening and they just sort of disappeared. And we're only halfway done. And I feel that they need to make some kind of appearance. We were promised a show. We need them back. Anyways, welcome to today's presentation, COVID-19, the global reset, and why that's a good thing. And, I can tell you that not everything is good. I think we all know that. We certainly have been forced into a lot of rethinking as we look at what happens in the back half of the year. I certainly have been forced into some rethinking. Innovation is something that we all have to adopt. I've recently started taking, in addition to hard cash for my speaking fees, peanut butter cups. And there is some debate on, only for select clients though, only for select clients. There is some debate on how many peanut butter cups I'm going to get and when they will be delivered. But for those responsible for the peanut butter cup delivery, and you know who you are, I await said payment. Okay, now on to the main show. Back to COVID-19, the global reset, and why that's a good thing. First, let me say that it's not all a good thing. In fact, a lot of it is bad. And we are all aware of some of the big things. Globally, we have over almost 8 million people, almost 91% of the world's population affected, 91% of the world's population affected, 7.9 million infected, and we're at 435,000 deaths. Now, what's surprising to me is that almost a quarter of those deaths are in the United States itself. And there's many different reasons for that. But the idea that one country can be responsible for almost a quarter of all deaths just astonishes me. Canada, we have 98,000 people infected, 8,100 deaths. Now, if I looked at the most recent statistics for Alberta, I think we're just at about 150. Now, one death is too many, but I'm glad we were able to clamp down on that. Of course, in the middle of all this, we have economic carnage of all kinds. $9 trillion US, $9 trillion US dollars in economic damage. And that's 9% of global GDP. If you take a look at the GDP numbers, I think this year we're at about $82 trillion globally. And the idea that in 3 months, 4 months, that 9% could be wiped out, that's amazing to me. And of course, throughout it all, a global recession looms. And so it's going to be very curious as to what the back half of this year may look at. I saw a meme this morning, and it was a bunch of people hiding around the corner with a big broom handle, and they were poking a door, trying to sort of gently move it over. And the door said July. And that's the way a little bit of how I feel as well, right? What's going to happen in July? But why is it a good thing? It certainly sounds bad. You know, why is it a good thing? And if I were to say that the one reason that it's a good thing is that in every crisis, there is an opportunity. And John F. Kennedy said this back in the 60s. The Chinese used 2 brush strokes to write the word crisis. One brush stroke stands for danger, the other for opportunity. In crisis, be aware of the danger, but you have to recognize the opportunity. And so this is a unique opportunity for all of us to reimagine future possibilities. And I can tell you that without a slap to the head like this, you know, we would have just continued going the way it was going. It looked okay. You know, you see all sorts of employment numbers through the roof. You see all sorts of, you know, GDP numbers going strong. The world's biggest economies continue to get larger. Wow, so that sounds really good. But is it? Is it a good thing? And so we go back and look at some of the key aspects of what we use to measure quality of life measures. And, you know, maybe everybody is not participating in all this greatness, goodness, in the same way that the people at the very top are. So this allows us to reimagine those future possibilities. If we were to look at some of the major categories of what we are going to reimagine, well, maybe we start with society. Let's start with society. Here's the thing. If this doesn't shake everybody up to the idea that we are part of a global community, you know, you can put up all the border walls you want, but the virus does not carry a passport. It doesn't need a visa. It does not need your permission to move across. And we all have to recognize that globally, we're part of this interconnected community. And people, the virus can, you know, can come across to completely different hemispheres in a matter of hours. We're connected at an economic, at a health, at an education level. All across this connectivity, what it ultimately comes down to is that we have to recognize that isolationism is not an option, and that cooperation across all of these categories is an absolute necessity. This is a painting from 1898 that depicted a boulevard in Paris, France. In Paris, if you want to relive a time period where there's absolute, you know, turmoil in all sorts of things, nothing was permanent, you know, between the years 1789 to probably the late 1890s, you know, I think there's probably 5 different governments that took place there. But one of the things that was really plaguing France at that time, Paris in particular, because of the congestion, was various types of epidemics. There was cholera, there was a little bit of typhoid. And what urban planning had to do was to reimagine the city so you wouldn't have all this congestion. And so you had much wider boulevards being built. We had more light, more air coming in, and you see these things being opened up. And in large part, that had to do with the epidemics that they suffered. Now, Ross reminded me the other day, it was also so they could shoot artillery down center aisles to control any insurrection. I don't really know about that, but I prefer to think it's more about the epidemics. And so you're seeing that along Jasper Avenue now as well. You see that along Saskatchewan Drive. You're opening those kind of things up. Will those be permanent things today? I don't know. You know, but this idea that we have to plan architecture not around density necessarily, but around livability. Entertainment is staying in the new going out. And, you know, binge watching was a thing last year and the year before. Maybe it's the new thing. And you see that, you know, Disney is launching its brand new streaming service. Netflix added 16 million subscribers in Q1. Now, I do wonder what they're watching. Are they watching Tiger King? And I turned it on for about 30 minutes, 20 minutes. I couldn't watch it. What the heck is this, right? Or is it going to go into more highbrow productions like The Crown? The Crown, Netflix poured $100 million into the production of that particular series. And they have a ready audience for it because people are staying home more than they ever have before. Online gaming is rocketing. 52% of console gamers play for 6+ hours a week. And, you know, if you're in the dating circle right now, that's a very easy thing to spot, ladies. That's a very easy thing to spot. Get out while you can. Work from anywhere. It's clear, fewer offices. You know, I just finished redoing my lease for one of the companies I'm involved with. We literally downsized our office to 60% of what it was before. Everybody's working remotely. There are times when people should still be in the office. Not everybody has returned the way they were going to, because they had such comforts of such flexibility, and all the resources are available right in front of them on the screen. And the surprising part to me, and you know, this is another thing of this COVID upside, I would never have guessed in a million years that I could preserve the culture of my company online, but I can. Surprisingly enough, I can, and it appears that our people are happier as a result. Now, by some estimates, up to 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working from home during multiple days of the week in the coming years. You know, I think the US stat was, you know, something like 34% are able to work from home. Their job allows that kind of flexibility in the sense of if they had to do it, they would, but only 4.3% actually did work from home. Well, I'll tell you, COVID is going to turn that stat on its ear. And maybe it ushers in new technologies as well, like holographic conferencing. So we actually have what looks like real people right in front of us. Is that possible? Right? You never know. Celebration of science. One of the most disconcerting things to me in the past 4 years, and you can imagine what happened 4 years ago, is the rise of my personal opinion trumps your facts. You know, and some people say, well, that's always been the case, but you know, there's almost a celebration of that during some of these new government regimes, whether they be in Brazil, whether they be in the United States. You know, we have the strongmen returning and putting this populist sentiment forward. Your opinions matter more than facts. And I think we're seeing the opposite of that. We're seeing the regain of science as a status symbol. So you have names like Fauci, and here in Alberta, Hinshaw, and they have regained that ability for science to have a celebrity aura. The idea of personal opinion trumping facts, I think, is fortunately, finally on the decline. Renewed focus on healthcare as a social commons. You see this in Canada. You see this recently, you know, back in the 50s, 60s, calls for healthcare as a universal basic right. And of course, we have that for years. And now we're slowly going back the other way. What should be privatized? Maybe all of it should be privatized. In the United States, I cannot believe that they still haven't figured out that healthcare is a basic right. It's not a privilege of people for people who have money. But this idea that when one part of the social fabric frays due to a healthcare crisis, it quickly tears upstream. The ream rends the entire fabric. And so this idea that healthcare is a social commons for everybody, people that can afford it and people that can't, because even if the people can't afford it, if they get sick, the whole fabric rends. A renewed spotlight on society's marginalized groups. We have renewed calls for universal basic services, which is beyond just healthcare. It can also span things like food security, transportation, legal services. It costs a lot of money to be poor. It's very expensive to be poor. And that expensiveness, because they can't afford it, again, when the fabric, the social fabric starts fraying at its edges, eventually the entirety of that fabric will be affected. On the topic of technology, this category of technology, telemedicine. And you know, we've already saw some major advances in robotic surgery and telesurgery, where you have a neurologist in New York operating on somebody in Tulsa, Oklahoma through a very fast fiber connection, and very low latency when it comes to the twist of the surgeon's fingers and the actual manipulation of the robotic pincer. And so you can't have, latency in that, and you got to do it quickly. And so we're going to continue to see this, whether it be as simple as a checkup, where, grandma or you or I can get checked out without having to go and wait in a waiting room with 80 other people, and be able to do this on a schedule and get a lot of what needs to be done and prescribed over the screen. Robotics and AI, this is only going to continue. So we're already seeing the artificial intelligence part of it, was already used to predict where the virus would go next and where you had to marshal resources to prevent that spread. And so AI is going to continue to dominate these kinds of topics. And the robotics part is really simple. Robots don't get sick. And so the mundane, monotonous tasks and those kinds of things, the robotics, for good or bad, they're not going away. That adoption will continue to accelerate. The global internet. I read a great article just a couple of days ago in researching this particular presentation. And it says, while the virus, the COVID-19 virus, and whether it was SARS, years before, whether it was Ebola, years before that, all these kinds of things, whether those kind of epidemiologies on a healthcare basis wreak destruction, I will tell you what might be even greater is if the global internet goes down. What we're doing right today would not be possible. And the idea of calamitous economic devastation occurring as a result of a virus, a digital virus, attacking the global internet, whether unleashed by bad actors or otherwise. I guess it would only be bad actors. That's a big problem. And so this growth of cybersecurity firms and cybersecurity courses. My nephew is right now taking cybersecurity down in Maryland. It's a whole major 4-year degree around cybersecurity. This is not going away. Beyond that, the improvement of this digital highway, we're going to see things like 5G cellular, which is literally going to triple the amount of data transmission capability on a bandwidth basis, literally triple that. And what happens, when 4G came about, the only reason Uber is able to be Uber, the only reason Snapchat was able to come forward was because we unleashed 4G. 3G didn't have the bandwidth capability. 4G allowed that. And with 5G, the sky's the limit. And they're already working on 6G. So no, today we got Zoom, we got Google Meet, GoToMeeting. We got Wi-Fi 6 around the corner. All these kinds of things. The backbone of how we work, how we play, how we entertain ourselves is very much becoming not the car and our ability to transport ourselves to these various venues, but through a digital highway, which is only going to get much more well-trafficked and much more dangerous in the process as well. Environment. In some cities in China, you saw global greenhouse gas emissions drop by 25%. Pollution, New York City has seen a 50% reduction in what is deemed to be pollution in that city. And if you've been to New York, trash is all over the place. Air quality, cities across the world are reporting way up proportional air quality days, good quality air days. Waterways, for the first time in a long time, you actually are able to see dolphins back in the Venice canals. How's that? Schools of fish, you can see them, and that's all because the traffic is way down. Now, what this all means, I'll give you one more, clear skies. In some parts of India, which is right next door to the Himalayas, they're seeing the Himalayas, those mountains, right next door for the first time in 30 years. The first time in 30 years, because air pollution has dropped. Now, if all of this COVID-related activity, which now stemmed humankind's impact on the planet, if the magnitude of these events could only be speculated on before, it is clearly abundantly apparent now that humankind, taking our foot off the accelerator is really good for the planet. is really good for the planet. Economic. We have to re-examine the limits of our economic system. It clearly is not working for everyone. It just isn't. The idea that the 22 richest men in the world own more wealth, control more wealth than all of the women in Africa is a sign of a problem, not a sign of something we should celebrate. And it is clear that wealth and income inequality, opportunities that are not available to the vast majority of people, and are reserved for elites of various kinds, whatever those elites are, that's something we have to re-examine, because if we don't, we're leaving the vast majority of the world out of that equation of bringing themselves up to participate in the whole. There's going to be a resurgence of Glocal and reshoring. So Glocal, think global, act local. Reshoring, bringing industries back to this country. So about 3 years ago, there was a major movement in the United States to reshore the steel industry. And the steel industry was kept going to Europe and Asia and things like that, but they want to bring that back strategically. One of the reasons is for military reasons, strategically, right? They want to have some kind of steel making capacity. But this idea of bringing back those jobs, bringing back those industries so that it serves the constituents that are going to be working in those positions here in this country instead of elsewhere, that's only going to be good for everybody. And we're going to be able to bring our economies back more evenly than in just things like finance or high tech. Let's make that a more even recovery. There's going to be a wider adoption of e-commerce. I have a little digital marketing company that I'm involved with. And when COVID hit, we lost a good chunk of our legacy B2B clients. And they just sort of gave up and quit. We need to pause. The most shocking thing to us in the last 3 months have been the number of new clients we've gained that either did not have an e-commerce presence or wanted to expand their e-commerce presence. I'll bet you 90% of our new clients are out of Alberta, if not out of the country. And so this idea of wider adoption of e-commerce is an absolute necessity. It's not even an option anymore. And 30% of Canadian consumers are buying things online that they would never have thought to buy online before. This wave is not stopping. There's going to be less spending on frivolous consumer goods. I'll bet you if there's 90 days in the last 3 months, I would have put on a suit or a jacket in the last, for 10 of them. That would be it. That would have been it. And so if there's less spending on frivolous consumer goods, not that a jacket's frivolous, but just knickknacks and things that you don't really need, does that herald the end of the shopping mall? And so we already have victims, and you can see the victim list here just in Canada: Forever 21, Papyrus, Pier 1 Imports. And the idea of whether they were serving a common good to begin with, that may be in some question. Now, this wouldn't be a business presentation if I didn't show you how you might be able to benefit by looking at some companies that are poised to skyrocket as a result of it. Now, this is not an investment advice. Do not take this as investment advice. I'm not an investment advisor. But here's some companies that are poised to benefit from the new normal. So stay at home. Amazon, not going away anywhere. I think it's the world's second largest company now. Apple just hit $1.5 trillion. Costco, everything basic. Clorox, everything you need to wipe things down. Peloton, get fit at home. And Walmart, we got the Staples Group again. So everything you need to hunker down at home. Health, Amedisys and Teladoc are two companies that are bringing health care to the home. So everything you possibly want, don't go to the doctor's office, don't go to the hospital, except for the most serious stuff. They will bring it to your home. And Gilead Sciences is a big pharma right at the forefront of developing new vaccines for COVID-19. Work from home. I've signed more DocuSigns in the last month and a half than I did all of last year. Google, Slack, Zoom, all familiar names. Now, again, this is not investment advice. I'm not giving you investment advice, but these companies have been rocketing. Entertainment. You know, for those guys who'd rather, it's always a guy for some reason. For those guys who'd rather sit in front of a TV with a controller, here are the big ones. Activision Blizzard, Electronic Arts, Nintendo. And of course, you know, with streaming, we've got Disney and Netflix. And again, Netflix added 16 million new subscribers in Q1. E-commerce, Amazon, FedEx, you got to get the packages from Amazon to your home. PayPal, how do you actually transact the payment? Mercado Libre is one of the largest e-commerce platforms in Latin America. Shopify has gone to $700 a share. How did that happen? Just a few months back, it was around $200-300 on the downslide, but it never had gotten past about $400. And XPO Logistics competes with FedEx in that delivery of the goods. 5G, you want to bet on 5G? This is the next big wave. Crown Castle is literally 5G's landlord. And what they do is that they lease the towers, maintain the towers, lease the towers, cell phone towers for the 5G signal. And if you want to get into some chip makers, there's no better stocks than Qualcomm and Xilinx as far as companies go. I don't know about the stock investment value. I'm really paranoid that you guys are going to act on an investment advice. I'm not giving you investment advice. All right, here we go. All right, so there you go. We've got some context, some background, what it means, where it's going. But all of this probably comes down to one single point. And the point is, this is a time to reflect. Is what we've been doing what we should be doing? Is what we've been doing the right thing to be doing? What else should we stop, start, or abstain from? So it's a time to reflect. And last week I ran across a viral meme, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. When I looked up the young lady that wrote it, she was picked up by USA Today, all sorts of TV networks. She was on the news. I think she was like 24 years old, 25 years old. A lot of wisdom from a social media marketing consultant out of Newport Beach, California. And here's what she had to say. And I'm going to read it for you. Poem by Leslie Dwight. A poem by Leslie Dwight. What if 2020 isn't canceled? What if 2020 is the year we've been waiting for? A year so uncomfortable, so painful, so scary, so raw that it finally forces us to grow. A year that screams so loud, finally awakening us from our ignorant slumber. A year where we finally accept the need for change, declare change, work for change, become the change. A year we finally band together instead of pushing each other further apart. 2020 isn't canceled, but rather the most important year of them all. And with that, I thank you.
Wow, Kurian, thank you so much. I'm like spinning, my head's spinning with questions right now. I want to open it up to everyone. Go ahead and if you have a question, add it to the chat bar. If it's a question about the presentation, if it's a question around Kurian's brand new book, 7 Essential Stories Charismatic Leaders Tell. I know that today I'm quite sad we're not all together in person because Kurian is one of the most charismatic folks I know. So it's great to have you on again today. But I guess maybe I'll start with a question.
Is it about peanut butter cups?
Yeah. You know, if you want to give your address, we can ask everyone to ship them to you as your thank you following today. Certainly. Someone better be listening, right? I'm curious, you kind of shared both sides of the argument. Do you feel like this is going to widen the disparity gap, or do you think it's going to close it? You've talked about, you know, some of the pandemic's effects on us recognizing the global community, but also, you know, just the different areas of concern with business and minimum wage. I mean, the list goes on.
I think it's going to do both. What you're seeing with the George Floyd protests, and it's a grand awakening of the disparity between the haves and the have-nots, of income and wealth inequality, opportunity inequality between the top and the bottom. So you're going to see that, and so I think from that perspective, there's going to be a greater desire population-wise to bring everybody in the fold. The flip side of that in the short term is that things like social distancing and stay-at-home are an absolute luxury for the vast majority of the world. You can't do that in a favela in Brazil. You can't do that in the slums of Mumbai. That is an absolute luxury. So we live in this time where you have these various disparate ends of where people fit. And I don't think, and for the haves, I don't think there's a choice other than to bring everybody else along, because that social fabric, if it is fraying at the ends, it will eventually rend the entire material.
So we've got a few questions coming in here. Where do you see Alberta-based companies in the adoption of working from home? TransAlta, as an example, has already announced a return to work policy on July 31st.
I think there's going to be two things, right? So obviously you can't be an oil derrick worker working from home, right? That's going to be an impossibility. American company, but Twitter says all of their people can work from home forever, if they want to do that forever. Now, here's what's going to happen, right? I think if your job is able to be done from home, and the vast majority of times, if you're sitting in front of a screen, banging out whatever code, you're creating reports, you're moving things forward, sending emails, you can do that from home. And so even if your employer does not want you to do that, maybe they cease to become an employer of choice going forward. So that's only going to hurt them in the long run.
There are, questions are just coming in like crazy. Are you promoting non-capitalism? That's quite a strong question that came in.
I am an absolute capitalist, but I do not see how anyone benefits if we leave people behind. I just don't get it. So I espouse a form of capitalism with a strong social safety net. And if that social safety net, I hate what's going on in the US, where everybody fends for themselves, and they're actually yanking back unemployment benefits in July, $600 a week, because it's going to be a disincentive. What kind of crazy person thought of this? That social safety net needs to be there. And so I'm a strong proponent of capitalism, but also a strong proponent of this idea of universal basic services across the board: legal services, transportation, food security, including healthcare, education, etc. Now, one of the things you might be very interested in is why the game Monopoly was invented. And so Monopoly was invented, I think, in the 1920s, 1930s, something like that. It was to teach the dangers of capitalism. And so once you start building homes and hotels and all that kind of stuff on your properties, suddenly all the money comes to you. You effectively become either an oligopoly with your buddies or a monopoly against everybody else. Very tough to catch up once you start accumulating all the wealth on the monopoly board.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So we've got a question around how would you launch your book in these changing times? So really bringing it home with your experience with business.
Sorry, repeat the question.
How would you launch your book in these changing times? How has that been for you?
The book itself, it's been challenging, because normally you'd actually be out on the road doing, book signings and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, 6,000 copies have been downloaded so far. So, that's kind of good. So people are reading it. And, most people, the main thing is to get out there in a digital format, right? So everything's digital. It's not like it wasn't an important thing before, but it's the only thing right now.
I'll maybe wrap it up with one last question. I do want to mention that we've got a ton of thanks around this great presentation. There's a question here. You mentioned that you've seen corporate cultures remain strong. even as employees start working from home. Do you have any advice on how to do this effectively, keeping these corporate cultures strong when your employee base is remote?
At its core, so this is a good little segue. We'll go back to the book. The book is actually divided into two sections. The first section is all about culture. What is culture and how to identify it and build it. The second book, part of the book section, is all about these 7 stories to infuse that culture within. The central part of culture is about values. It is about belief systems. It is about ways of acting and behaving even when no one is around to reward or punish that behavior. And so you can still have that kind of connectivity. Like we run our little company with Slack and Zoom and Google Hangouts and all that kind of stuff. And you're still maintaining those bonds. But the main thing is you have to define your values first. What are those values that differentiate you from your competitors, differentiate you from anybody else your employees can go and work for? And that can still be preserved in a digital form. Now, I still think you have to get together sooner or later. It can't be all that way. But I also know that it brings a huge opportunity for people in Alberta, in Edmonton, to be working for people all over the globe. And it's not just somebody that you have to be, chained to, here in Edmonton or otherwise. There's lots of opportunity out there.
Thank you so much, Kurian, for sharing all your insights. And thanks for everyone who's asking questions. I really feel like this engagement is what makes us so grateful to be part of such a supportive alumni community. I want to thank the board for all of their work this year. I want to thank the school for all of their help with putting today together. Kurian, I'm looking forward, as Ashton mentioned, to a signed copy of your book. There were a few questions. There are a few questions still coming in, so I'll flip those to you. I'm not sure if we can maybe get those answered, but I know we're out of time, and I'm so grateful for everyone staying connected here as we ran a bit over. We're going to be sending out a survey to everyone who joined us today, and we really ask that you complete it. We'll probably be looking forward to many more virtual events in the near future here, and so your feedback is incredibly valuable to us, and we look forward to keeping in touch. Do follow us on social media, do connect with us via LinkedIn, and stay in virtual touch. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.